Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement 2. On today's video, we're going to take a look at this monitor. Is this any surprise to anyone? If you know me, I love CRT monitors, and what we're looking at here is a Zenith ZVM-131, and it's from June of 1983. This is a color monitor. It looks like it has RGB on it. It's got composite as well, so makes it pretty useful for such an early display. I have no idea if this monitor works. So what I want to do is take a look at the outside of this thing, as I usually do, and then we'll open it up, look on the inside, power it up, see if it's working. And you know what? It seems like this era of monitors, early 80s, they're so reliable that this thing probably just works perfectly. This would have been a very expensive monitor, I would imagine, when it was new, because, you know, RGB in the early 80s, yeah, like that would have cost a pretty penny. I'm assuming, without having looked up anything, that this was probably designed to work with Zenith's line of IBM PC compatible computers, or they probably made some other computers as well. So most likely the RGB that we're going to find on this thing is probably digital TTL, so CGA style compatible RGB input. Okay, well let's take a closer look at this. Starting on the left side, we have Zenith Data Systems, their badge. Zenith was a US television manufacturer, or electronics company actually, and then they ended up making televisions. And they moved into the data systems era, aka digital processing, computers and stuff like that. I think pretty much in the consumer market, although I'm not 100% familiar. I know they partnered up with Heathkit, a company pretty much world-renowned for making really good kits that you could buy and put together yourself. I have no idea if this monitor came as a kit, but they definitely sold Zenith TVs as a Heathkit that were basically not assembled, and you would assemble it personally as your end user. As the end user, you would put together a color television in your home and then use it as a regular color TV. And you could save some money doing that, and of course, learn electronics along the way. The Zenith ZV1 terminal, which I had several videos on the main channel, that was available both as a Heath kit, so I guess assemble yourself kit, and a fully assembled Zenith version. That's typically the way it was. If you bought it with Zenith Data Systems badging like this, it would have been already assembled. Moving over, we have a little door, which is still intact, so we'll just flip that down. Actually, it's hitting the 70s towel, so just move the monitor a little bit. We have sharpness, tint, color level, black level, and display drive. So display drive would be on other monitors labeled picture or sometimes contrast, on color screens at least. And black level would be the brightness, because the brightness control on CRTs pretty much is just adjusting the black level. Volume control, light sensor, so we have some kind of automatic brightness control, pretty interesting, and push on off. So you push for on, push again for off. Latching switch, and it is not broken. Now I can tell looking at the CRT, this is going to be a somewhat low resolution CRT because I can very clearly make out the shadow mask. This is the stripe type of shadow mask, and the screen is very dirty. This was given to me by someone here in the local community, and I don't think they knew if it worked or not, but this definitely needs a good clean, but nothing that it can't be cleaned up. There are some scuffs on the front bezel here, so there and here. This is painted. So I have to be careful trying to clean this, that I don't get the paint or take the paint off, because it is this brown color and underneath will just be this lighter beige color, I'm sure. Because this whole monitor is probably painted this beige color as well, it means that there's no yellowing on here, which is nice. But there are a lot of scuffs all over the sides, at least the side I'm looking at. Let's rotate this around. It's very heavy. It was, as I said, pretty expensive when it was new, I'm sure. So the weight, you know, weight equals quality, I suppose. Looks like we have 4 fasteners that hold the rear cover on. So I'm assuming I take those off and then we'll gain direct access to the innards of the set. The top cover, which goes all the way down to about here on both sides, probably has fasteners on the bottom of the set that you take off and then you can lift that off. There's our FCC ID for this display, Zenith Radio Corporation. There's the model number, 1.42 amps, 120 volts, 60 hertz, a service number, a serial number, and there's the aforementioned manufacture date of June 1983. What I'm not seeing is a sticker that shows us where this monitor was manufactured. Now, it does say manufactured by Zenith Radio Corporation from Springfield, Missouri, and that's not necessarily telling us that this monitor was made in the US. It just means that it was manufactured by Zenith, but by 1983, when this was made, they had overseas plants. So we'll maybe figure out a little bit more once we open this up. On the left back of the monitor, we have our connections. Starting on the top, we have video input high Z. So this means that there's no 75 ohm termination. The reason why you'd potentially want that is if you were daisy chaining or using a splitter and connecting up several monitors together. Only one of the monitors should have 75 ohm termination, which this jack has there, 75 ohm, it says it. So you would plug high Z into, let's say, 2 other monitors, and then the final one you would connect up with 75 ohms. A lot of times when you have connections like this that say high Z, you either have a switch to switch between it and 75 ohm termination, or you might have a pass-through, so in and out for the high impedance, because as I mentioned, the high impedance, the whole point of that is to really connect up multiple monitors together. We do have audio in and out, and they look like 3.5 millimeter, probably monaural input jacks. Well, yeah, almost certainly monaural. There's no way this thing is stereo. And then we have our 25-pin RGB input. Hopefully with a little bit of searching I can find the pinout for this. But like I said, this almost certainly is going to be digital TTL input, most likely CGA standard with the dark yellow being brown. There's a little extra bit of circuitry inside monitors that are CGA standard to do that. Otherwise, you would just get a light and a dark version of the same shade of yellow without that extra circuitry, which mixes in a little bit of extra red into the dark color to produce that brown. We have 2 toggle switches here. One says green and white. So I guess this is for some kind of a monochrome mode. Oh, that switch is really gummed up. I have to clean that up before we try to use it. And next to it, we have RGB and composite. And that one's also gummed up. I'm not going to try to move those in case I snap those off. Over here on the other side of the monitor, we have a focus control for the flyback, and then there's our fixed power cord, and it is a 3-prong grounded cord. It's kind of old style because, of course, this is an old monitor. And that's all there really is to say about the monitor on the outside, at least. Let's take a look at the bottom to see if there's anything hiding under the bottom, and then it will be time to open this thing up. Okay, on the bottom, curious, it's got a rear kickstand. So this is the front of the monitor, and this would allow you to tilt the back of the monitor up. Why? And I'm afraid of trying to release this because there's a little plastic clip that holds it, and I don't want that to snap. The bottom of the case is also kind of curved in a little bit, like something's been applying pressure over the years. But the feet, they're in good shape. They're not gross and sticky, so that's nice. And I do see holes. There's 2 here and here, which maybe will release this back cover or top cover, I'm sorry, but we'll figure that out once I get the back cover off, because that'll be the next logical step, get this cover off. All right, fasteners are off, and that just lifts off. Well, there it is. Okay, it's a lot more busy than I anticipated. So remember on the label, it said June 1983. Well, someone wrote June 14th, 1983 on the inside with some marker. There's a good amount of soot right here, which tells us that this thing obviously was well used. So it could be worn out for all we know, which is fine. I mean, it makes me sad when I get a worn out CRT, but on the other hand, it means that it was used for its intended purpose. It wasn't like this thing was purchased necessarily and then never used, and that would be sad, especially if it had been smashed or recycled. Obviously, this one hasn't been recycled because it's in my hands now, but so many of these have been recycled, and that is just kind of sad. Okay, so one of the things about this, I'm gonna have to either take the cover off or get a flashlight, because I think there's oh, what are those old diodes called in there? It's got a big heat sink on it, and I forgot the name of these diodes. It's a type that was used on older sets, and well, you have to kind of stack a whole bunch of them together to drop a bunch of voltage, and I'm wondering if that's what this is using, because why else is there this giant round thing with heatsink on it? I can't remember what that diode type is called, but I think that might be one of those. Now, just looking at what's going on, like what is this board here? This thing, by the way, hasn't been turned on in forever, and I do have to warn you, don't open up CRTs unless you know how to do so safely, because even when it's off and it's been used recently, there are potentially lethal voltages, and then especially if it's plugged in to mains while it's turned on, there are definitely lethal voltages inside, because 120 or 240 volts, depending on where you live, that's enough to really hurt you. So be very, very careful, and only do it, like I said, if you know how to do so safely. And if you don't, then don't open up a CRT and leave it to someone who does know what they're doing. Okay, I need to stop just sort of looking around because I just dropped my screwdriver on the floor. It's pretty interesting. There's a giant board over on this side that takes up the whole side of this set. And this is the video input board. I see there are some ICs on there, a whole bunch of cables that make their way down to this lower board, which almost certainly is going to be deflection. Although the flyback is on another circuit board over here, This has the high voltage anode, which is connected way over here on the left side of the CRT. I can see a large round capacitor in the set. It's like that big around, one of those big, tall, like Sprague branded ones. And then we have the neck board, which is pretty large. And one thing that's kind of interesting is that the CRT connector that's on here is something that I don't think I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever worked on a Zenith color anything before. Monochrome, yes. Color, no. And of course, I have friends who do lots of CRT work, and they definitely have worked on lots of Zenith TVs and stuff like this. This may be common, but this is not something, this cap here, that I would ever see on something like a Philips or, well, any of the Japanese brands, which is the stuff that I'm used to working on. Now, one thing I can see is, it will be a little bit hard to see on the camera, but there's an EIA number, 343, and it says Mexico, and it's on this connector that's on the neck board. It's also on the yoke, and I can't see if it's on the CRT. It says third shift. There's a sticker on it. I don't know. We've got to get the top cover off so we can get a better look at the rest of this set. Let me figure out how that works exactly, because immediately I don't see how this comes off. There really aren't any fasteners or little plastic covers with fasteners underneath them that I can see on the outside of the monitor, except for these two that are on the front edge. So I'm just going to start taking out fasteners that I can get to until things start to kind of come apart, and hopefully it doesn't result in a catastrophic disassembly of the monitor. It looks like the top cover is, yep, there we go, that's it. Just needs those two. I suppose the back part is held on probably by that back cover, because it actually screws through the plastic and into metal. And there's a metal chassis underneath there. Inside our cover, June 20th, 1983. Nothing else that's particularly obvious. Well, the construction on this monitor is, shall we say, robust. Lots of metal, very thick, bars holding it together, and yeah, it looks like it's a real quality part. Here's our label on the monitor: Zenith Trifocus Picture Tube with EFL gun, made in USA. An actual CRT made in this country, 13 VBW P22. And this is what I was talking about with the third shift. It says April 13th, 1983, third shift. If we look on the side, this is that Sprague cap I was talking about, and it is a Sprague. Don't know what this is covering. Oh, it looks like that's probably, well, there's a large transistor under there. So either the horizontal deflection, or maybe it's a voltage regulator. Probably deflection though. Judging by the fact that the flyback is attached right there to this board, that almost certainly is horizontal deflection. And I don't know why there's a little cover over it, because usually, well, what does it say here? Hazardous, electrical shock. It looks like this plate itself that circuit board's mounted to is mounted to the rest of the chassis. So I don't think that's electrically live while it's running. It's just telling you like, hey, by the way, watch out. There's potentially lethal voltages in this area while it is running. I'm going to take this top bar off just to give us a better look. And because right now it kind of obstructs the view. Oh, just looking inside of here, I'm seeing all sorts of stuff that I don't normally see. And I'm sure for anyone who works on Zenith televisions, this is run-of-the-mill and pretty normal. I almost cut something that I didn't need to cut because it's one of these loop-de-loop things. Those wires are held in there like that. Anyhow, I'm seeing all sorts of stuff that I don't normally see, and I'm sure for Zenith people who have worked on Zenith a lot, they're like, oh, that's just normal. For me, it's just not something I ever do see, and it's certainly not something you see in later sets. And specifically what I'm talking about is on the deflection yoke, and I'm trying to grab my pointy tool, these things. There are 3 of them. Well, normally on a deflection yoke, you have wedges. Hopefully this is actually in focus, but you have little wedges that you jam down in there, and you use a little bit of, Solastic or glue or whatnot to hold them in place. Well, this thing's adjustable. You just turn these, and they're threaded, and they actually push against the CRT, and it's just plastic, so it's good that it hasn't broken over time. But that allows you to really get this finely dialed in to get that convergence just correct, because as you move the deflection yoke up, down, left, right, around, it affects the corner geometry or the corner convergence, and that's just a cool way to do it. A more costly way than using wedges, and I happen to have some wedges sitting here on the floor, so I can show you what they look like. But yeah, I took these off of another TV that I recycled, and there's 3 of them here. And basically you would take one of these and just jam them in there like that, and you'd put, in 3 corners, tri-point, just like there are 3 of these, one down there, one there, one down there. Well, that's just a cool way to do it. Okay, so let's start over here on the video board. I'm not going to take this out. I want to see if this thing works because the serviceability of this is not great just because there are so many boards. The cables that go between everything, they seem to be long enough that potentially you can get this into a service position. Knowing Zenith, it's probably designed for easy servicing, but I would have to slide all these boards out, and if everything is working and I don't see anything, that looks catastrophically damaged, I'm not going to take this apart unless I absolutely need to. Anyways, this is the video board, and the funny thing is even though Zenith made a bunch of stuff themselves, that's a Hitachi branded IC there. I can't quite make out that one, but this is an RCA chip. So this is the video processing board, and yeah, they're using parts from other companies to do the processing, which is fair, it's pretty normal. But of course, if this were made by Hitachi, the entire monitor, they pretty much stick to Hitachi parts because they pretty much made everything. Maybe not the little passives and things like that, but at least all the semiconductors and the CRT and all that stuff would have been from Hitachi. But I guess by '83, maybe Zenith wasn't quite making everything. And I'm sure there are people who are watching this who know a lot more about the history of Zenith than I do, who could probably speak up about that. But looking at this board, I don't see anything that looks bad when it comes to capacitors, because those are our culprits here, the electrolytics. I don't see any kind of horrible circuit glue that's turned conductive that will potentially damage components, break them off the board. So that's good. I just really kind of need to give this thing a good look in there. Something's floating around inside the bottom of the set, a little tiny thing. Not a big deal. Yeah, those caps down there, they look okay. And the good thing about these boards, at least the video board there, is it is not connected with a board-to-board interconnect. It does connect everything with these cables. So there are a bunch of harnesses. That doesn't mean that there's not bad solder joints on these, and that could be something that I'll have to take this thing apart and really go through it with a fine-tooth comb, especially on every single connector, everything. Well, yeah, those are the things that typically have the bad solder joints, and anything else that gets really hot. The transistor that's behind this little cover, we can actually pop this off so you can take a look at it. Don't really recognize the markings. It's from 1983, 10th week. It just says 1029 and 01 on the second line. This is connected with wires on the other side, so that is not attached directly to a circuit board, because that's where you could also have bad solder joints. Let's just pop this little cover back on for safety or whatever. Now, something else I find very fascinating about this monitor is it looks like the whole assembly, the CRT and all of the electronics, is in a metal chassis, and the plastic front and bottom should come right off. There are fasteners along the bottom on both sides, and I bet you I could see fasteners on the top here, here, and two more on that side. I bet you all the plastics come off. Whether that gives you any better access to anything other than maybe cleaning the front of the glass, I'm not quite sure, because, for instance, the video board has a metal plate on the side that covers the bottom side where I might need to do kind of repair work. And this board here, this is obviously the deflection board, this one that's standing up, and it's got a cardboard cover on it, but it's very much obscured. I can't really look at it very well. And on the bottom, same thing. It's a big metal plate down there. So there's really no access to any of these boards unless you take this thing completely apart. Incidentally, I can see stamped on the plastic down there, May 24th, 1983. So yeah, it's just interesting seeing the various components were made at different times. And we've seen a date spread of almost a month, I think, at this point, or maybe 20 days, which is interesting because you would think, modern day factories, I mean, modern even something, 30 years ago, all the components would have been made in the same place or very close together. So you wouldn't have had monitored plastic cases sitting around for almost a month before it got assembled together into a monitor. You do a lot more of that just-in-time manufacturing than I guess was happening at this point. On the bottom board, which you really can't see, I see Nichicon caps, so that's nice. It's dirty. I see Hitachi integrated circuits, lots of potentiometers. Looks like the power supply for the monitor is down in this area. It almost looks like it's a switch mode power supply, although I can't say for sure if that is the case, not without looking at schematics. I see a big dropper resistor there, so might not be a fully switched power supply, but it's probably an isolated design, especially because you have the video inputs here. It would need to be, and I don't see any transformers on the video board, so probably there's kind of isolation transformer stuff happening on this board to some extent, or something like that. It's hard to know exactly. As I said, looking down there, I don't see any glue, which is good. Caps that kind of flopping around the breeze a little bit, which isn't good, but it's better than having that glue, which gets all gross. It's really, really dirty on that bottom board though. I don't love that. But like I said, lots and lots of adjustments. And anything else that's going on? I see a sticker that kind of fell off down here. Let me try to get that out of here. What is this? It's probably a warning sticker or something. Oh yeah, it is just another high voltage warning sticker. Yes, we know, high voltage. I think I might have hopefully mentioned, I haven't turned this monitor on ever since I've owned it. And I've had it for like a year. So there's nothing to worry about inside of this other than dirt and creepy crawlers that might be in here. Here's that sticker. Yeah, this would have been on the CRT, I would imagine. Discharge high voltage to DAG ground before removing high voltage cap from CRT. Good advice, good advice. Now looking at this, the only thing that I'm wondering about is this large Sprague capacitor, and I'm wondering if I need to, if I got to get this out of here and try to reform this, because these big boys, they really appreciate getting reformed. And how do I get that out of there? So it's got these metal clamps that hold it in place, but it also has these zip ties. But it feels, I'm just trying to see. It's not a lot of space to get it out of there. It is connected with wires. And where do these wires go? Well, I'm gonna cut these big honkin' zip ties and we will try to figure out where those wires go. Maybe there's enough length on there I can kind of pull this out a little bit. Although, what am I saying? There's no way this is gonna be able to go anywhere because of these. Yeah, no, that's a no. There's no room. So this appears to be connected or fastened with these clampy things onto the deflection board, which does look like it comes off. So let me get this cover off. I think there's one fastener right here that holds that whole board on. Okay, it's not just one, but there's one there, and there are two more on the back side. So let me try to get this out, and if I can get this to turn sideways, I should be able to get the cap out, and then I can try to reform it. Because I don't like powering things up like with big caps like that, just blasting them with full power right away. Incidentally, you saw that there were audio connections on the back. I do see a speaker down there, and it's sort of behind where it said Zenith Data Systems. There was a grill there. So over here on the left side, I could see it. It's a pretty sizable speaker too. It's not just some cheap junk. Question is, the 3 fasteners I just took out, is that it? No, of course not. There's one more fastener on this board up on the front side, and it is way, way down there. I'd need a really long extension to get down there. And it makes me worry that I wouldn't be able to get it back together. I think what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to maybe take off the plastics. Would that even help? Would that help? It might. At least I'd be able to see what this capacitor is going to because I could look underneath. So let's get the front panel off. Plus, it needs a good clean anyways. If I get all the plastics off, I mean, that's assuming this monitor even works, which it probably will. I can give this thing a good clean. And this monitor, as I mentioned, has been sitting around for quite a while, so I'm really glad to hopefully get this thing taken apart and tested finally. So yeah, in case you're wondering, the CRT itself is mounted to the metal. Right here, there are tabs. It's not mounted to the plastic at all. So this plastic should just come off and expose the whole front of the monitor, which is kind of cool looking. You could run it that way if you're okay with that, I suppose. But like I said, it will clear up well, it'll give me full access to the bezel so I can, or under the bezel, so I can clean the glass. And yeah, it's loose. It's not quite coming off yet. Why? I think what's happening is, oh, the controls are attached to the plastic. That's annoying. All of these controls are coming off with this, so I can't just take it off. You're kidding me. Oh, the speaker's attached as well. I'm sure if I look in the service manual, I'm sure there's a service manual, if I could find it, it would tell you exactly what you need to do to take this apart, and I am completely not doing that correctly. So all the controls here have cables that kind of go into the monitor, and none of them, when I move this, it's not obvious what it's actually going to. So now it makes me think that I might need to take the whole chassis out of the plastics, because I think what that'll do is I'll be able to get the bottom off, and maybe that'll allow me to see where those cables are going. So I'm just sort of trying to look in here. Oh, I see, like one of them is way back over here. So I assume the service manual just tells you, disconnect this, disconnect that, take that out, move that. Yeah, because one of the cables that's going to the front is like way back here on the video board. So it's looping all the way around. I can just tell because when I move it, it moves. And this is really all because I was just trying to get this cap out of here so I could try to reform it. I do notice, by the way, that the cap is actually multiple sections. 3,000 or 300 microfarad, 180 volts, 1,700 microfarads at 180 volts. So it's really just two halves. So if I had to replace this, I could just replace it with a 300 and a 1,700, and those are relatively easy to get. And they're not nearly that big, but these are reliable caps. You just reform them and then they're totally good. I can see where it goes. It goes from this board, it's not even part of this. It goes from that down to the main board, which I think is the power supply. I could see the wires where they connect to the main board, but there's just no clearance. And without getting this whole thing out of here, which has a fastener that's impossible for me to get to, because this is not going to reach. I need a long extension. I suppose I could go find extensions, but what I worry about is it feels like the fasteners they're using, these are not magnetic, because this is a magnetic bit here, and that does not stick in there at all. So I'm kind of concerned that if I take that out, getting it back down in there will be quite difficult. So I think I'm going to abandon my attempt to try to reform this because I just can't get to it, and I think I'm just going to turn this thing on. I wouldn't have been surprised that this thing was turned on by the person who gave it to me at least once to see if it worked. So why don't I just do the same thing, I guess? I don't see anything out of the ordinary. None of the caps are bulging. None of them look like they've leaked. I don't see anything that looks burned. Looking down at the main board down there, it's just dirty. So I'm probably gonna hit it with some compressed air. I put the fastener, or at least one of the fasteners, to hold this board back in. So there are two fasteners that go down into the chassis, so it's properly grounded. I don't know if it matters or not. I'm going to leave this front panel as it is because I can clean underneath it, so that's good. Yeah, let me blow some compressed air in there. Try to clean this up a bit. All right, the battery on my camera has to charge right now, so we'll take a look at the service manual, which I was very easily able to find. So this is the ZVM-131, but there are some other submodels, and let's see what the difference is between those. The ZVM-131 and the 135 color monitors, together with their export versions, the -E's, can accept both RGB and composite video from different sources and have full audio capability. The 131 and the 135 are the same, except the 131 has a medium resolution display and the 135 has a high resolution display. So that is 40 column versus 80 column. And I could tell the 131 here has that low resolution, or medium as they call it, because of the shadow mask that is visible. It's going to have a brighter and more vibrant image though, so that's the trade-off. There are high resolution versions, the 133 and 136, that they're export versions. They have no audio capability and their inputs are limited to those with RGB. The 133 and 136 are the same, except the 136 has a high persistence phosphor CRT. Well, that sounds pretty cool, but we have the 131, so we don't get to see high persistence phosphor. So the 131, yeah, there it is, 390 dots. So you can think of that as like 320 by 240 would look okay on this, and they're specifying that 40 characters across is okay, or 390 pixels horizontally. Yeah, interlaced or non-interlaced. Yeah, this is definitely an NTSC standard type monitor. 1 volt are terminated or 75 ohm terminated inputs. Synchronization is 5 volt TTL, 6 megahertz bandwidth on RGB, 2.5 megahertz on composite. So very soft, not good for 80 columns, that's for sure. Export version is designed for 240 volt markets, 50 hertz, and of course 120 volts for North America. And then the 133, which we can assume is the same as the 135, there's that high resolution CRT, so good for 80 characters or 640 across. It's very similar to the Commodore 1084. 20 megahertz bandwidth on the RGB. What did we see here? 6 megahertz. So quite a bit difference. I don't know if there's actually differences in the circuitry or if this is just the CRT itself, but it's hard to know exactly. There's the 135, which, yeah, good for 80 columns on RGB or 40 columns on composite. Same 20 megahertz, and we have 3 megahertz on composite versus 2.5 on the other one. Here's just connection examples, hooking up to some kind of Zenith computer, I suppose. Okay. This has a fixed RGB cable, whatever this computer is. Interesting. Looks like B plus on this monitor is 150 volts. That's kind of expected for typical monitors like this. It also has a 26 volt supply, 12 volt supply, composite drive, cutoff voltages. I mean, none of this stuff is particularly useful right now, at least. 120 volt DC transfer supply, G1. Yeah, well, okay. Anyways, lots of good service. Typical Zenith, very good service manual. A whole theory of operation and description of the circuitry for the RGB input and the I signal specifically. It does mention for use with a PC. Does it have the extra thing to make the brown? It certainly doesn't mention anything about adding extra red to the dark yellow. So that's interesting. So maybe this does not have full CGA capability. It was like designed to work with some other personal computer that wasn't fully CGA compatible. Looks like we have access to RGB drive and cutoff controls that's on the main board that's on the bottom of the monitor. Horizontal centering control. It's going to be kind of hard to reach that one. Vertical height and B plus adjustment and a vertical center control. Interesting. We have a width selection jumpers. I was pointing to this when I took the monitor apart, wondering what this board was, but it looks like you can actually move these jumpers around. Width selection shown in position for Zenith computers. And this is up, that is down, and that is exactly how this monitor is configured right now. It looks like, yes. Interesting. It's talking about hooking this up to the Zenith Z100 computer. It says, when the hand prompt appears, you may have to defeat the auto boot by pressing escape. Press the T to obtain the test menu and the monitor ROM. Test menu does not appear, the computer beeps, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and then you can go to basic, press Control, Alt, Insert, and enter test. Press return. It's like keyboard test, and it's like talking about diagnostics and color bar test. And oh, look, a basic program. Gotta look up what the Zenith Z100 is. It was a competitor to the IBM PC. So this is one of those, whoa, 8085 and 8088, dual processor, available CPM and ZDOS, not compatible with MS-DOS, non-IBM compatible MS-DOS variant, 5 S100 slots. Wow, interesting. So 640 by 225 bitmap display with 8 colors, low profile or monochrome. Looks like up to 768K of RAM was possible. Wow, yeah, I'm kind of unfamiliar with this computer. Oh, it looks like this is it right here. Interesting looking computer, and there's the monitor sitting on top of it. But what a curious computer. Obviously a bit of a flop. Interesting font that it uses. I kind of like that. Just different. Yeah, neat. This would obviously be the 135 variant of the monitor, the high resolution one. Not the one we have here. I wonder why they sold the two versions. Yeah, interesting. The Z100 was near compatible to the IBM PC using standard floppy drives. It also ran a non-IBM version of MS-DOS, so generic MS-DOS programs would run, but most commercial PC software used IBM BIOS extensions and would fail. Several companies offered software hardware solutions to permit unmodified PC programs to work, and the Z100 had unusually good graphics for the era, superior to the contemporary CGA 640 by 200 monochrome, or of course CGA's 320 by 200 4 color. Yeah, it says here that you got 640 by 225 bitmap display with 8 colors in the low profile model, I guess, of this computer, or monochrome upgradable to 8 grayscale all in one. That is pretty cool. That's much more like the Japanese computers of this time were giving you, this 8 color thing. NEC, I think, made a computer that had that exact output standard as well. Neat. Anyhow, the rest of the service manual goes into the block diagrams, and oh wait, look at that, I just noticed something. There is the pinout for the RGB. Let's take a look at that a little bit closer. Negative horizontal or positive horizontal on 2 different pins, and it can also accept composite sync. Positive vertical or positive composite sync. So you can put composite sync on any 3 of those pins and it will work. There's the RGB inputs, reserved for vertical height select. That's odd. Green feed through. Oh, Apple X1 support. So this supports the Apple color scheme as well. So this will be used with the Apple III or the Apple IIe with Apple RGB card. There should be 4 inputs. There's the extra one. Yeah, it's X1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, and 8. I thought it was 1, 2, 4, and 8. I think this might be a typo. Either way, it's similar to RGB with intensity, but different matrix for decoding it. And this one is called IBM intensity. So it implies they did design this to work with IBM CGA cards. So I suppose the Z100 only used these 3 inputs, but IBM, you'd add this one, and maybe you do get that extra brown color. Audio input, composite video input, so you can feed that right through that connector as well, not have to use those jacks on the back. And they do give you some information on how to connect all those connectors, because you unplug all those and then getting them back together, you might be kind of confused. Now, here's something that's funny. The 133 and 136 do not have composite video input, but yet there's composite video input right there. So I wonder if it's there, it's just there's no jack on the back of the set. No, I don't think they actually support it. And the reason why is I thought I saw in here somewhere that it doesn't even have the controls. Yeah, so there's the back, so no input. And look at the front. It literally only has a contrast knob, no color, tint, any of that stuff. So that's just a mistake on their part again, that the 25 pin has video input. This monitor does not support composite. I mean, it would need to have those controls there if it did. I guess it has no speaker either. Yeah, it has no audio input, so no speaker control or no volume control. Now, what I was curious about was the disassembly instructions, because since that's where I was really, really struggling. So, okay. Well, interesting. Let's see if it has instructions on how to take it apart. That diagram is potentially useful. Okay, so here we are on disassembly instructions. Main board, speaker, secondary control assembly. This would be the controls on the front. Remove the back cover and the top cover. Done. Disconnect the cables from the secondary control assembly. Okay, so all of the wires that route to various boards you do have to remove. Then you can remove the 4 screws holding the cabinet front, remove the front cabinet, or front of the cabinet, and remove the 2 screws holding on the secondary controls. These are the controls on the front of the monitor. So all the various cables that route all around to different boards, you have to unplug them just to get the front panel off. Not a great design, not a great design at all. And here we are looking at the front of the set. So those are the 4 fasteners that hold the front panel on. I think, well, I guess this is actually the primary control board. So yeah, it's fastened on the back. The speaker is there. This here is the power switch, I think. I think the reality is with this monitor, it's working on it's not easy. So I would not recommend getting one of these unless you are okay unplugging a whole ton of cables to try to take this thing apart. Let's hope this thing works. I don't have to do anything to it, because if I have to take this apart further, this is definitely not going to be happening in this video, because there's a lot of connectors on here and a lot of them look similar to each other. I'm gonna have to like mark them all so I know exactly where they came from, where they go, all that kind of stuff. Because just getting this apart is way harder than it is on like a Commodore 1084, the Philips monitors, or pretty much any other monitor that you work on from this era. Like even the Commodore 1702 is so much easier to take apart than this thing. This thing is built like a tank, but it's also difficult like a tank to take apart. All right, so this thing is much cleaner on the inside, and that's good. And I use this to clean up those 2 potentiometers on the back here, or sorry, the switches that are on the back. So both of those move freely now, and hopefully that's good, because they need to work for us to be able to select composite or RGB on here for testing. And I've decided, because it's impossible to get this blue cap out of here to reform it, that I'm just gonna plug this in. And if something catastrophic happens with that cap, then I will need to replace it. And I'm pretty sure I have in stock what I need to replace that anyways, if it comes to that. And the front panel is just flopping around in a breeze here, but it's good enough that I can clean behind it, which is what I really wanted to do anyways. So because we might have things go catastrophically wrong inside this monitor when I turn it on, I'm gonna power it up with the backside facing the camera. This connection here, by the way, goes to the speaker, because I was investigating removing the front panel. So I'll just leave that off for now. It just plugs in right there. Those 2 pins. I'm gonna set that to white. This is set to composite, so, well, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I set up my phone next to the monitor running Spectroid, and I have it zoomed in between, well, I'm just gonna zoom in essentially where we need to be. So that's 15 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, so we should see a big spike right around there when this thing turns on, if it works, or it goes catastrophically wrong, and this video will have been me just sort of fiddling around for no reason. Okay, all right, so I have this plugged into a power strip, and it's currently off. The monitor is on the front panel. It is set to composite, and I think we're ready to see what happens. So I'm gonna stand back just in case something catastrophic happens. I don't want to be in the blast radius. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. Well, it came on. It is running all right. A lot of staticky noises, but nothing bad. And that is good. And you can see on the phone a big spike. So we are running. Now, if you could hear that noise, I can't. It would be super loud, judging by how huge that spike is on the phone. It's interesting how it's pulsating on the phone there, isn't it? Let's turn it off. Okay, there we go. I turned the switch off and it ran for a while afterwards. So that implies actually that there's good capacitance in that Sprague cap. Here we go again. Let's turn this on. There it is. This thing is working. All right, I think I'm going to turn it off. Yep, takes about a second for it to actually shut off. I'm going to rotate it around so we can look at it, because I'd like to see what we see on this front display while it's running. Do we have collapse deflection? I probably should have paid attention to that sooner with a mirror, but I didn't. So here we go, back on. We obviously have horizontal deflection because that's the high voltage. Oh no, we have vertical deflection too. Very nice. It's very bright. Oh, that freaked me out. That's because of this light sensor. Okay, that is cool. So let's see, what's what? Black level. It was turned up a little bit from the detent. The brightness control does not have a detent. The pots are clean. They're not scratchy at all. I'm amazed. I'm freaking amazed, actually. Sharpness control has a detent. It was just slightly off the detent. Which one's that? Tint. Tint does not have a detent. Color was turned all the way to the left, like someone had turned the color down. But yeah, okay, that looks good. I mean, I know it's rolling in the camera. I'm gonna get something hooked up to this and switch the camera to lock the frame rate. That is just weird. I gotta hook a video source up to it and stop talking. I just realized something I should do before I do anything else. I'm gonna turn that off. Oh, look at that collapse. That looks cool. I just wanna see if that Sprague cap is warm to the touch. It is not. It is cold to the touch. So a lot of times if those caps are failing, they will start to get very hot, and that's dangerous because they could start to vent. So you really wanna check that they're hot, and it's not at all. It's totally room temperature. So excellent. Okay, test pattern generator is powered up. It's outputting on this cable here. So let's plug this into the 75 ohm terminated input, which I have just done. And let's turn this thing back on. We should be already set to composite. Power LED, I didn't even notice that we had one of those. Okay. Nothing. Nothing. Let's check the switch on the back. Oh, it must be in RGB mode, because that's the green-white switch. Okay, so that's the other switch. Oh, wait a second, there we go. So the connection from the generator, let's just move the camera a little bit here. Is there a big bar in the middle right now? Oh, it was out of focus. I must have the connection wrong. So this yellow cable is supposed to be color, the other one monochrome, and well, it wasn't doing anything. One thing is, this monitor's noisy, I gotta say. So this little thingy works, this little sensor. If I put my finger over it, it dims the image. Anyways, by noisy, what I mean is that I can hear the deflection. The vertical deflection is quite loud and annoying sounding. Normally you just hear like a slight 60 hertz ticking from a monitor, and this is, I don't know, it's more like a screechy noise, and I don't like it. Okay, the problem with our cable was I had it hooked up to the chroma output. Got a bad connection on the back here, or something. So let's hook up this color output now. All right, we have color, excellent. All right, so there's a lot of sharpness on this monitor. I do see the dot crawl, so it really doesn't do a lot of filtering for that, for the like notch filter stuff. Okay, so what's what here? Black level, this is the brightness control. It is way too low. So there needs to be a sub brightness control I need to turn up because I need to be able to see this stuff here. I mean, the monitor looks pretty good, actually. It looks pretty darn good. I am kind of surprised. And I think what's going on right now is it thinks we're in a dark room, because we kind of are. And the sensor, the light sensor, is very much shielded from the overhead lighting. So yeah, if I cover it with my hand, it gets a little bit darker. But if I turn back on the bench or studio lights, that got a lot brighter. Oh yeah, that does work. It's kind of cool, actually. It's an old CRT, so the phosphor itself is pretty light colored, and that's because later CRTs used a tinted front glass. That would help kind of, well, give you better contrast ratio that this thing doesn't have. But I gotta say, this monitor's working pretty great. Even the color balance is pretty nice. I don't love this light sensor. I guess you probably get used to it, but it just keeps messing with the intensity of the image. I think what I need to do is just let this thing run for a while and kind of let it just wake up. But that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Convergence looks quite excellent. This monitor really could use better notch filtering than it has. It does have a sharpness control, but it definitely, that over softens the image, so it doesn't just add extra peaking, it really does soften things. But we do have dot crawl even on this image, and that's due to the chroma decoding, which I don't love. And yeah, you have a real dot pattern visible in this. I don't know if that's going to come across. Let's shut the lights off again. It really is quite obvious. The shadow mask is pretty low resolution, but there's also just sort of the dot crawl in the solid colors even. That's just something you don't get on later sets that have good notch filtering. You'll have dot crawl in between the two colors, between the green and the magenta, but you certainly wouldn't get it in the solid parts. But this monitor doesn't seem to do a whole lot of that, the notch filtering that is, and that will result in a sharper image for the composite video, and I guess for computer displays, that's probably better. I think what I'm gonna do is just let this thing sit here and run for a good 20 minutes just to make sure that it's okay and nothing catastrophic happens. And then I'm gonna, once it's warmed up, I'm gonna adjust the color balance because it is a little bit towards the yellowy green side of things, which might have been the way it was when it was new. I prefer to be a little bit cooler, like D6500. The whites, I like them to be a little bit more blue than they are here, so I'll adjust that into here. Things are looking good though. There are no issues with the color purity. You can actually check that out. So green, red, blue, perfect. Zero issues whatsoever. Grayscale, this is where I'm talking about, is a little bit on the yellow side, so I can adjust that out. That's pretty good. That's really good. And that pattern, that looks good too. But we have the usual issues here with the dot crawl from the chroma decoding. It'd be nice if there was like a monochrome switch that you could engage on this thing to disable the color decoding entirely. I can plug this white cable in though, and this will have that same effect. So let's do that. There's our monochrome image. Let's bring up the resolution test here. Yeah, there's pretty much nothing visible over on this right side or that bar. So this is the bar that's running right at like 3.54 megahertz, the resolution. So normally that's filtered out by the notch filter, and this is filtered out on this monitor as well. So I mean, it is filtering. So I don't know why we have a bit of a dot crawl, but I guess the filter is just not ideal, or they tuned it for trying to be a little sharper. So I can adjust the sharpness here, and you know, we lose that one entirely, which it shouldn't. But yeah, the center detent is probably the correct position on this monitor, pretty much as good as you can get. And looking at the same pattern again, but with the color video output, this has the chroma decoding. Now we have chroma artifacts happening, especially in this one. That'll always happen, but it's happening on these as well, which is just par for the course. It's an old monitor, and I'm sure when it was new, it worked exactly like this. It's just how they were. But anyways, I'm gonna let it sit on this test pattern for a while, and hopefully nothing bad happens. Fingers crossed. And then I'll adjust the white balance. Everything is working really well with the monitor. I increased the vertical height just slightly because I could just see the very top of the image. And I've also adjusted the sub brightness. Turns out there's a little control in the front. It's just right above the brightness control. There's actually a hole. You stick a tool in there and you can adjust sub brightness. So I think I have this pretty much set appropriately. One thing I've noticed about this, which is pretty common with a lot of monitors that I have, at least at this point, is when you first turn them on when they're cold, the sub brightness or the brightness control is just a little bit too high, and then it sort of drifts down and then it settles. So you do need to let it warm up before you make any of those adjustments. I think this is, well, I don't know if this would have done this when it was brand new, but when you look in the service manual, it always tells you to let it warm up for 15, 20 minutes before you make any adjustments, because I think even when new, there was some slight adjustments that happened when you first turned it on. But right now with the brightness set to the center detent, I can just make out this bar of those 3 bars. So, which is how it should be. Maybe it's slightly too low, but anyways, it's quick and easy to adjust because you can adjust it right from the front panel. I also turned up the blue bias, which has adjusted the color balance to a more appropriate level for what I like, at least. Just made the whites a little bit cooler and the blues are a little bit more vibrant. So things are looking pretty good. I also cleaned up the case and I reattached the front panel. I used the Dremel with the little polishing bit to fix the composite jack on the back so it no longer has a bad connection like it had before, so that works well. And what I wanted to do is get the Commodore 64 connected up to this thing, because I haven't used this with anything except for test pattern generator. So let's turn on the 64, and yeah, there it is. So a couple things we are noticing. Well, horizontally it's shifted over to the one side, but unfortunately there's really no exact standard for any one thing. The Commodore 64 itself does sort of output its image slightly shifted over versus, say, the Apple II. But I do see a little bit of the edge of the screen here. So I might try to adjust this slightly. Where is the horizontal width, or sorry, horizontal position? Horizontal center. Okay, it's on the main board in the front corner. Let me grab a plastic tool and try to adjust this. Yeah, I can see it way down there. I'm not even sure I can reach it, to be honest. So this might just have to live exactly how it is. I have this plastic adjustment tool, and yeah, I can't get that plastic tool onto there. So I may try to use this metal tool and just thread the needle. No, that doesn't even reach either. Okay, so I'm not going to be adjusting that. It would require a longer plastic tool than this because the control is sort of down here in the lower corner of the monitor. And I'm sure someone who's a service technician for these would have a longer tool than I do, but I do not. And I have a good amount of these plastic tools, but I do not have anything longer than this. So we're gonna have to live with the fact that it's shifted over a little bit, at least when used with the Commodore 64. Let's put a cartridge in here. Now we're hooked up through composite, remember, because this monitor doesn't have anything but composite and RGB. Okay, first I'm back on the color bars because I just want to adjust the tint so it's looking correct. It's hard to do it with the Commodore 64. Easy to do it with color bars. Okay, well there it is. I mean, it looks okay. Certainly the chroma pattern really is apparent, like in the solid backgrounds. I don't know, it's kind of a strange phenomenon with this particular monitor. I've never seen this where like solid colors just have this checkerboard pattern to them. One thing for sure that's happening is I feel that, well, the width is pretty narrow and it's kind of making everything look a bit squished, to be honest. I think that this monitor is really set up to be used with something like the Zenith Z100 computer, which obviously uses a lot of the video signal area. Just like the ZT1, that terminal, you really had to have a monitor that did not have overscan. Otherwise, parts of the image would be right off the edge. And I think that's what's going on with this. And since I adjusted the height to stretch it a little bit so I could eliminate a little bit of the black on the top and the bottom, well, that has resulted in everything looking a bit stretched. I may try to actually reduce that, turn the height back down. That is a control I can reach while this is turned on. It's still sketchy because it's down in there underneath the deflection coil, but let's see. That's the wrong way, obviously. Yeah, if I bring this in too much, then we get a black line at the top, which is obvious on the 64 at least. But that just might have to be the way that this monitor is, like that. And we look at the 8-bit dance party, it's still squished, but a little bit less squished. It does look good though, but the checkerboard pattern on the shadow mask versus the video signal, that just does seem a little odd, and yeah, I don't really love that. Besides the color artifacting we're getting because we are on composite, it's pretty sharp. Like the text is extremely readable. So if you had one of these hooked up to a Commodore 64 back in the day, I'm sure you'd have no complaints and you would have been happy. I don't think anyone back in the day would have really cared about the fact that it's got this kind of slight checkerboard pattern. Okay, I have a VCR hooked up. Let's see how this looks. I was worried that whenever I get a VCR out that it's, well, you know, not gonna work. So let's see if this Panasonic VCR does work still. Sounds fine. And it looks fine as well. I mean, you can see the little white thing at the bottom here moving around. That's the VHS. I think, what is this happening? I think it's switching between one head and the other, and just the time is not always exact because this is a mechanical thing. And we can see that little bit of a line at the top there. So I really do need to increase the height, or I guess just leave it like this so you see as much of the image as you can. And the picture looks good. Let me turn off the light, the overhead light, so we get a better view of it. Yeah, I mean, it looks good. Still has that checkerboard pattern that I was talking about in the color, that is. I think that's just the way the chroma decoding works on this thing. It's got to be. Or it's just the way this particular CRT works, this Zenith CRT. I'm just sort of looking at the shadow mask. It's pretty big. Like, this is a low resolution CRT. It really is. I decided to try to figure out what exactly was happening with this checkerboard pattern, and I took a picture of the CRT close up, and we're looking at just the green section, which is why you're only seeing those dots. You can see the problem here. The scan lines sometimes fall in between two of the phosphor dots, but sometimes the actual black part of the scan line, or in between the two scan lines, falls in the active part of the shadow mask. So that's what results in this checkerboard pattern, and it's pretty distracting, I have to say. I haven't seen this particular phenomenon before on a CRT, so I'm assuming either the actual shadow mask is just stripes as opposed to little sections, and that way you're never going to have the scan line falling in the black section in between two phosphor dots, or perhaps the lines in between the phosphor dots are just much smaller, so therefore the scan line, the black part of the scan line, or in between the two scan lines, doesn't really cause that moire effect. But pretty much everything you look at on this CRT looks like this. Solid white, well, any solid color has this exact problem, and it's exacerbated when you're looking at non-interlaced video, because then the pattern doesn't move. With interlacing, at least every other field is going to be the opposite. So that pattern is still there, but it kind of averages out, so it's not as distracting. But anytime you're using a computer with non-interlaced video, it's pretty ugly. And it's just nothing you can do about it. It's just a side effect of this particular CRT. But it's going to produce a nice vibrant image, and even on VHS, honestly, it looks fine. This monitor, what, is 43 years old? So it's amazing that it just works as well as it does, isn't it? I'm just going to try to hook up some audio here so we can hear if the sound is working. There we go. The jack on the back was a little bit dirty, but now it's working. I mean, the audio is not high fidelity in any sense of the word. This is hi-fi audio on the VCR, so it should sound pretty good. But we got a lot of mid-range, probably good for vocal track, but not a lot of highs and lows. But yeah, it looks great. I cleaned the screen as well. I used Magic Eraser on it to really get that grime that was on the screen off. I also cleaned the case while it was apart. I took advantage of that time to spray the grills, those parts where all the dust falls in, and really scrub them with a brush and put Windex and Magic Eraser. And it all came out pretty good. There's still a good amount of scuffs all over the sides that I really have to attack. And I tried to clean the scuffs that are on the front. I know you can't see them right now in the dark. And unfortunately, this brown paint is very, very thin, and I actually rubbed a little bit through on this one side. So those scuffs are actually the brown paint that's been removed, and we're looking at the beige plastic underneath. So I can't really clean those. I'd probably need to get some paint and mask this off and try to, put some brown paint on top of that. But this looks great. Let's turn the audio down. Now, this video wouldn't be complete with me testing out the RGB, so I'm gonna have to make an RGB cable that goes from the 25 pin to a 9 pin so I can connect up CGA, because that's what I really wanna know, how well it works with CGA. So I will just let this run for a little while, and while I do that, I will make the cable, and then I will come back and we'll test, see how CGA works. Yeah. Okay, I made the RGB cable, and while I was doing that, I noticed one interesting thing about this monitor. On the back there's a green switch, I think it's this one, and it does work on the composite video mode. Problem is it doesn't really appear to disable the chroma decoding. So let me unplug the color signal and we'll switch back over to the other cable if I can find it. This is the monochrome signal. Yeah, there's the monochrome signal. So if the color decoding was disabled when I flicked that switch, then we would have actually seen grayscale bars ramping up just like this from light to dark, but we're not seeing that. If I turn the switch now, is this the right one? There it is. So, yep. That's what it should look like with the color decoding disabled. And even if we have color decoding disabled, but we're plugged into the color output signal, which is this one, well, this shouldn't be black this way. We should have that natural grayscale ramp. So that would have been an extra feature to disable the chroma decoding when you flick that switch, but they did not do that. All they do is they simply probably disable the blue and the red drive, and all we're left with is just the green drive, the cathode drive that is. And that's what you would get when the color decoding happens. Oh, I can demonstrate the way it should look if we turn the color all the way down, which is this knob here. There we go. So even though I'm hooked up to the color cable and there's dot crawl, that's normal. But the color decoding, when it's enabled, blanks out these bars when it shouldn't be. Okay, well anyways, let's try out this RGB. I think I have it wired up correctly. So this is for CGA. And if this does work, I will put some hoods on this so I can keep this as a little pigtail for the future. Okay, I have a 286 set up with a CGA card. Hopefully this thing is working. I haven't tested it. Here's the CGA output. Let's switch this over to be RGB. Can't remember which switch it is. That's not that one, it's that one. Okay. Let's plug in this cable and let's turn on the bench power supply. 3, 2, 1. That's normal. There we have it, CGA. Okay, so I've turned the brightness down a little bit. Quite a bit, actually. That's interesting. So I adjusted that sub brightness for the test pattern generator. But, oh, it's that, yeah, this stupid sensor thing is so annoying. Gotta admit, it is not finding my compact flash card. I don't get why the colors are so, oh, this stupid sensor. I hate the sensor. Just because moving my hands around changes everything so dramatically. Okay, so if I put my hand there, it thinks there's a lot of light in the room, so it's brightening up the image. But if I move my hand, it gets nice and dark. Well, either way, hopefully you're able to see that the text is very hard to read. Colors aren't great, and there's like purple text right here, and it's basically impossible to read BIOS found. Let me get this thing booted up into DOS so we can run some test patterns. Okay, clearly I've wired things up wrong. That should be blue. Okay, well, one thing I can tell for sure, even though the colors are messed up, just because I have the wires wrong, we're still going to be getting all the same 16 colors. If I put my hand in front of the sensor, which I'm doing right now to make the image bright, we can see very clearly this does not support brown. Okay, I'm holding a piece of paper in front of the sensor. So we have light yellow here, and this should be dark yellow, AKA brown on CGA. And that very much is not brown. It's just a dark shade of yellow. So now we know this does not make a wonderful CGA monitor. A, because it's low resolution. The text is readable, it's 80 column text, but it's certainly not great, but then it's not rendering this color correctly. From my understanding, the Z100 computer that this thing was really designed to work with over RGB really only supported 8 colors, and I assume they would have been the intense colors, and the intensity bit just wasn't used. It's pretty surprising to me that they have what they call IBM intensity for CGA, and yet it doesn't properly handle the brown condition. But I find it kind of odd as well that they would even make a version of this that only supported or really had this low resolution CRT, because it's not great for 80 column text. And even if you're using this with an Apple II with RGB, it supported 80 columns, and an Apple III as well. So I don't know what the target of this is. What machine would have TTL RGB and really not be doing 80 column text? That I don't fully get. Hopefully the camera is resolving the fact that due to the low resolution shadow mask that's on here, really makes it hard to read some of these letters, like the yellow over the green. I mean, the yellow over the blue, it's just, the resolution is just not there. Check this out. If I remove the paper that's shining light on the little sensor, watch how dim it gets. And just moving the paper around in front of the set, that's a terrible feature. What made them think that anyone would want to use this? it should at least have a potentiometer to adjust how sensitive that control is, so how much it alters the image, because like, what is this? That is almost unusably dark. That doesn't make sense. Why would anyone want it like that in a dim room? It's almost like the picture's gone entirely. So there we go, it's better. I just swapped the green and the blue. I just wasn't paying attention when I made up the wires. The rest of the signals are all correct, obviously. And there we go, everything looks correct now on this screen. So we can cancel all tests, exit out of here. Sorry, my furnace just turned on. Let's run Jim Leonard's CGA compatibility test. The moire pattern on the background, this dot pattern and the shadow mask is terrible looking. And look how I move my hand here, how the pattern moves around. Here are some raster bars. They are working correctly. And here is the row reprogrammed high resolution 16 color mode on CGA. Looking pretty good, except for the fact that we're missing the brown, of course. And CGA compatibility test by Jim Leonard, and yeah, it's looking really good. And let's run David Murray's Planet X3. This does support Plantronics mode, which this card I'm using is compatible with. There it is, 16 color mode. And of course the ground looks messed up. That's supposed to be brown, because it's supposed to be like Earth, but we have just this kind of darker shade of yellow, which does not look right. But that's the monitor's fault. That is not the game's fault, that's for sure. And we could do Attack of the Petsky Robots, also in Plantronics mode. There's no speaker hooked up, so I'll just do no sound. And there it is, also looking pretty good. It's all shifted over to the side. So if I were gonna use this monitor more, I absolutely probably would want to try to get the correct tool so I could try to shift this over to the right, because this is not particularly acceptable. Same problem here where like the skin tone is all messed up because that's supposed to be the CGA brown color, and yeah, it's not. So it looks a little strange. It would be quite possible theoretically to modify the monitor to add this, but it would take a little bit of work. But yeah, the chairs look screwed up because they're supposed to be brown and red, for instance, and instead it's yellow. That looks weird. Anyhow, there we have it. That's the Zenith ZVM-131. This monitor is quirky. It's obviously well built, but annoying. And compared to other contemporary monitors of the time, or even things that were a little bit newer, for instance, the Commodore 1084 or 1080 that came out in 1985, that thing was just better in every way than this monitor. Higher resolution, but then far easier to work on than this thing. The fact that this thing has so many boards inside and they're all interconnected with wires, it's just unnecessary. And I think this was a leftover feature of the way Zenith built their television sets at the time. They were just using lots of little boards like this, and they weren't really trying to optimize and get everything down into one or maybe two boards like later monitors did. And because these cables don't even have extra length on them, you can't pull things apart, like the front panel can't come off without unplugging everything from all the boards. All the myriad of connections that go from this to the back all have to be unplugged. And it's not just like one harness, like with one big connector, like say on a car engine. No, this is like the cables snake all over the inside of the monitor. You gotta take all those apart. And to even work on any of the boards, if you're gonna try to reflow the solder joints, you gotta take all the connectors off and take those boards out. I mean, you saw I didn't even do any of that in this video because it was just way too much work, and the monitor does appear to be working perfectly. Staying on like this for a while, other than this super annoying sensor, there's no weird glitches or anything else that's happening. I think this is pretty much working as it should, and probably how it did when it was new, which, let's be honest, was kind of mediocre just because of the fact that they chose to even sell one of these with this low resolution CRT. Certainly the higher resolution version of this wouldn't have had these weird like checkerboard patterns and would have been easy to read in 80 column mode and just better in pretty much every way than this monitor. So if you see one of these for sale and you're thinking of getting it, just know what you're in for if you have to do any kind of repair on it, and know that this 131 version has a not great video image, and hooked up to a VCR, it's fine. But I gotta say that hooked up to a VCR over composite, I'd rather just use something like one of those cheap 13-inch Sharp televisions like I recently had on the channel where I modded it. That thing produces a better, more pleasing image over composite video than this thing does. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts of the Zenith ZVM-131, and we saw inside, so hopefully that gives the internet a little bit of a history on what this odd and certainly expensive monitor, well, is like inside and like to use. So there we go. If you like this video, thumbs up. If you didn't know what to do, thanks to my subscribers, thanks to my supporters, thank you to you, thank you to everyone. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, all the usual YouTube junk, and that is going to be that. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.